Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. Hey, by the way, not listening at the moment, but the college boy who edits this show after each day, happy birthday. Everybody can express their happy birthday wishes, I think, by, let's say, $500 or $600 million, maybe $800 million in profits in cryptocurrency. Just send it on over if you had $800 million in, what was it, the first 6 months of the year? Just sort of waking up to that news on Blue Sky. But, yeah, all right, first half of 2025 alone. Reuters reports the U.S. president's family raked in more than $800 million from sales of crypto assets in the first half of the year alone, on top of potentially billions more in unrealized gains, of course. So get up. It's time to go to work. All you nuts, get up and go out there and do the thing that you do that somehow gets converted into $800 million in 6 months for these no-good-nicks. And who knows how much else they're stealing. It's a feel-good message. I know. It's a happy birthday. I bet you can't wait to get up and face the world. Okay. Well, let's see. What other things are going on today? Well, there's plenty. President Trump remains overseas, which is fine by me. You can keep him. You know, I don't know if anybody's considering that. But think about it. I did see some video. I guess these things are good for, these overseas trips are good for two things. One, you don't have to say too much about what Trump is doing unless he's flying to or from one of these overseas stops. That's when he babbles to the press. And other than that, they keep him busy running around having meetings. And I have now seen some video from one of the things that they keep Trump running around doing. And you have to figure, I mean, he's kind of a doddering old fool as it is right now. And then if you put him on I don't know how many hours it takes to actually fly these trips, but I mean, he's on the plane, you know, for a day and a half overnight or whatever. And so, you know, he's not going to really have it all together. He never really has it all together. Then he babbles to the press. Then you bring him to these events. And they're strange and weird, and they're protocol events, and you know how much he loves paying attention to proper execution of protocol, right? So anyway, I have seen some video, and I saved it, and it's not, I mean, I think it's not got much in the way of audio, except, of course, for the second tape, which has sarcastic use of music underneath it. But I have two videos. Where did these come from? Olga Nestorova, who I've seen, you know, reporting on a number of interesting international issues before. Let me open it up so that I can look at the profile here. But she's just posting, if you're looking for what she's got here, she's on Blue Sky as, what is this? One ST, like One Street Press. I don't know whether that's One Street Network or, okay, but at any rate, she's there, onestreetpress.onestreetnetwork.com. It's not that easy to remember, but Olga Nestorova, who is a foreign affairs journalist and founder of One Street, in case you were wondering about that, has these two video clips. And once again, just as was the case with the meeting with Putin in Alaska, which turned out not to even be a meeting, with him, you know, wandering the red carpet, just sort of weaving back and forth. He's in Japan. I guess he's with the new prime minister there. And by the way, the new prime minister there, right, first woman prime minister, but also a little MAGA-y, which is kind of weird because, or I guess MAGA-y, or Majga. I don't really know how you would try that one, or how that would sound in Japanese anyway. She's conservative. She's a little MAGA-ish. It's a little weird. I'm sure she wants to, get to know Trump and get close to him and see if she can flatter lower tariffs out of him. They had some weird protocol event, which honestly, they're all weird. And if you had done it right, it would have looked stupid. They're in a room. I don't know how big it is. The room is more or less lined on the outer perimeter there's a military band. There are dignitaries from both countries sort of lining the walls, and they do a turnabout the room, essentially, like they used to, or allegedly, if you believe Jane Austen. They walk laps around the room, pause at where the flags are, and the commander of the director of the military band, and maybe some other military types, and maybe you do a little salute, and then you walk around and sort of nod to people, and then get back on the podium. So, okay, that's all that's required. But the tapes are of the prime minister attempting, and the master of ceremonies, the military master of ceremonies, attempting to direct him to where do you go next in this stupid walk. And if he sees nothing, hears nothing, knows nothing, cares nothing about what anybody's trying to tell him, and I guess hilarity ensues. They walk first over to the first corner of the room where the band is playing, and the Japanese prime minister makes a right-hand turn and is going to, do a clockwise loop around, and he just basically walks straight into the band and stops dead in front of them and just is just standing there still looking at trombone players, not saluting them or swaying to the music or anything, just standing there, whatever. He's a brick wall. He's a brick wall, and they've marched out of the Faber homecoming parade into him. But even he's the one that was moving, so it's weird and bizarre. And you can see them kind of pointing and directing, like, come this way. At one point, she has to walk around him because he's just standing there like an oaf in the way. They go around. They begin their tour. They get to where the flags are. She pauses, and I guess they're supposed to stop. He kind of continues on, and then he makes like a salute motion at the flag, and then walks on. And she's standing there looking at the camera, like, where's he going? Eventually she gives up, and she does what I guess was supposed to be required there. She stops, pauses, bows, and then moves on, catches up with him. There's a guy in military uniform, again, like gently, showing the way to try. He's having none of it. He does the lap. They walk past some other people that I suppose there might have supposed to have been polite nods, maybe handshakes, right past him. Back up on, he doesn't take his pants down or anything. It's not that bad, but I don't know. What can you tell you? International embarrassment. I guess the new prime minister of Japan sort of catching on to the idea that this guy's never going to learn my name. He's not going to have any relationship with me. We're not going to get anywhere with him. He may keel over and die before he figures out who I am. It was very interesting to watch, I think. And the music, I didn't love the musical choice. Usually, I thought it was going to be, there's a limited number of things that can add to that. But this was one of them. I'm getting tired of seeing the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song pasted over these things. But, okay, that's what I saw. All right, so thanks to Olga Nestorova for finding and passing those things on. That's how he's spending his time when he's not getting brain MRIs, which are totally a part of everybody's usual annual physical. Yeah, he's still bragging on that and insisting, of course, that every woman and particularly women of color that he encounters who are opponents to him are low IQ, and he is very high IQ, and he knows that because he aced the exam, which, as you know, is supposed to be for doctors to tell whether or not you need to wear diapers or can you dress yourself? Can you take care of yourself in the bathroom? Are you capable of living on your own? Do you need to be in dementia care? And he says it starts out very easy, but it's a hard test. And I think he did cite the test we all think it is. It starts out very easy. Tiger, elephant. What did he say? Tiger, elephant. I forget what it was. But meanwhile, we've seen I suppose there could be a version of the test where the pictures are of a tiger and an elephant and something else, but was reminded in seeing the thing recirculated. It's a lion, it's a rhinoceros, and it's a camel. It's just not the animals he said it was. But of course, remember, he's bragged that he also has super memory. So, take it for what it's worth. All right. There are definitely other things that are going on, and you need to pay some attention to. It is coming up towards the end of the month. Reminder that as the Trump family rakes in And we're all raking it in, aren't we? How much did you rake in the first half of the year? You do a lot of raking, did you? Anyway, in addition to all of that, while they're raking in that money, we are days away, I guess Friday being Halloween. Oh, where's my should I probably have Halloween sound effects, right? There we go. Horror dramatic. I know you kids love it because of candy, but we're trying to make America healthy again. That's why the evil music. See, anyway, Halloween will mark, of course, the end of the month. Saturday, November 1st, means no more SNAP benefits. And also, of course, so the federal payroll, everybody's going to miss their paychecks. The troops, OMG, the troops won't get their paychecks. It was interesting, of course, to watch. I think we mentioned last week, but we didn't catch up on the story. I don't think I even bothered to park it in Instapaper. Somebody, it sounded like a Trump lie, and it may have been a Trump lie at the time that he said it, but last week he said a friend of mine, a very wealthy friend, I'm not going to tell you who it is, has donated $130 million. He said, I want you to pay the troops. I'm upset that the troops aren't getting paid. I want them to get paid. It's terrible. I respect the troops. Here's $130 million. Of course, I think somebody said that's $125 per person under arms in our standing armed forces. So 1/2 of one day's pay, essentially, as it turns out, for everybody is 1 million plus people in the armed forces. $130 million. I guess to the extent that it's a grand gesture, and it isn't, because the person who gave the money now, it turns out, is a member of the Mellon family and has plenty more they could be giving up, but are not because reasons. And so nobody really gets paid. I don't even know whether there's a mechanism for taking that money in and actually getting it to troops. But I do remind you, money is fungible. It's just as true to say that person gave $130 million towards buying 2 luxury private jets for Kristi Noem to fly around in. Although he left $60 million left on the tab there. I think they paid $194 million for 2 jets. They already had private jets for her to fly around on, but she wanted more luxurious ones because she needs to fly around to more cosplay opportunities than the average Department of Homeland Security secretary, I guess. And so you also, want, I don't know, fresh linens in the bathroom or something like that. So, but we didn't get that story on the record. The New York Times did. I'll give you the basics of it just so we get the name right. Donor who gave $130 million to pay troops is reclusive heir to Mellon fortune. It is Timothy Mellon, a billionaire and major financial backer of President Trump. And the picture that they have of him to illustrate the story is way old, and in fact in black and white, although they had color film at the time. I don't know why I guess the New York Times was still working in black and white at that time, though. And I guess that's how reclusive he's supposed to be, that they only have a photo of him, or they decided to use a photo of him from a property tour that he was taking in 1981. A grandson of former Treasury Secretary Andrew W. Mellon, Mr. Mellon was not a prominent Republican donor until President Trump was elected. So he's reclusive and ultra wealthy and has never had to do anything for his money. And wow, he ended up crazy and stupid. I can't believe it. Anyway, Timothy Mellon, reclusive billionaire and major financial backer of President Trump, is the anonymous private donor, says Tyler Pager of the New York Times, who gave $130 million to the U.S. government to help pay troops during the shutdown, according to 2 people familiar with the matter. But I guess the 2 people familiar with the matter aren't familiar with how people get paid during a shutdown and how much people should be getting paid. But anyway, as others have observed, although observed in more, in more eloquent terms, if I go searching for it, I think it was possibly Aswin Subsang pointing out the other day when that story finally broke is, so what you're saying is that this guy, like many others in this country at this stage of the game, have $130 million lying around doing nothing, which they can give away to the government and not miss it, and the government could use it to pay for people's salaries or services to the United States or other governmental functions. It's supposed to get us to say, what if we had a system whereby this was happening all the time and we didn't face deficiencies every once in a while, or always have to be tightening our belts over things, or deciding that some people are going to have to starve so that other services can go on, even if they are destructive services, like killing a whole bunch of other people. That sort of thing. All right. Well, at any rate, yes. And I guess I should point out is not everybody getting the money is fungible angle on all of that. He didn't actually say, all right, never mind, screw the troops, pay for Kristi Noem's jets. But money being fungible and them just having spent about that amount of money on the two jets, and it being very, very uncertain as to whether or not there's any mechanism to actually funnel that donation into government coffers and dispense it. And of course, it being relatively pointless to do so. Although I guess if you haven't been paid at all, $125 in your pocket so you can go to the commissary, which they're thinking of closing, so that you can buy some food for your family to hold on until the next drip or drab or somebody or Elon Musk supposedly sends you money, something like that. Take it, don't leave it behind. But anyway, that's the situation here. I'm just saying that you can regard it as having been spent on the planes, because it's almost certainly not going to actually be converted into $100 checks for the troops. Anyway, right. So there's that. I just thought I would tell you about that. Oh, and I probably ought to open up the email and see what other wonderful things are being sent my way besides all of the reminders that the Virginia elections are coming, though there doesn't seem to be much room for any of the rest of it. Now, Timothy Mellon, an interesting fellow, and I should take a look on Blue Sky and see if I can find the other things that people have been saying about him, because as it turns out, you'll never believe it, he's an extraordinarily wealthy person who wasn't a big political donor until Donald Trump came around, and golly gee, there are some connections to that other guy who is connected to every damn thing that's going on or not going on in the government right now, which includes connections to Jeffery Epstein. Isn't that something? That's rather amazing. Now, let's see. Where have we seen that reporting? I'm just searching to see where, who has mentioned it. And there are a few, but here from Mueller, she wrote, you remember Mueller, she wrote, it's almost embarrassing at this point to have Mueller in your handle, but that's how she got famous. But saying, I haven't seen anyone talk about how Jane Doe, an Epstein survivor, just sued the Bank of New York Mellon. I can't believe that that's the name of it. I guess did they merge two banks to come up with that? That's the actual name, Bank of New York Mellon. Wow. For funding Epstein and failing to file a suspicious activity report. A Mellon heir is the one who just gave $130 million supposedly to pay the troops, but as it turns out, maybe it went to buying private jets instead. Seems like bribery to me, she says, pointing to the Reuters reporting on that subject from October 15th. A woman who says she was abused by the late financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein sued Bank of America and the Bank of New York Mellon, that's a real name, on Wednesday, alleging the banks knowingly provided financial services that enabled his sex trafficking operation for years. They declined to comment on the situation, but okay, we'll, keep an eye on that as though there were, these two things had nothing to do with one another. I think there was probably more, too, and full reports on the situation. But I think, the headline and screen cap should probably do for right now on that subject. On other subjects, though, that are more complicated and involved. As it turns out, there was news last night of a shakeup at ICE. And, of course, not the good kind of, if there is a good kind of shakeup, we aren't going to have it under this administration. A bad shakeup, if you can imagine it. Trump plans to install Border Patrol officials to lead a more aggressive migrant crackdown, according to NBC News. I saw this described in social media posts yesterday as essentially a decision to hand over the wild, lawless raiding activity on all over the country to the control of the Border Patrol types rather than ICE types. Aaron Reichlin Melnick, who also becoming very prominent denizen of Blue Sky, senior fellow at the American Immigration Council, among other things, very prolific commentator on Blue Sky, says it this way in grabbing screenshots of from Twitter screenshots from Bill Melligan, who I don't recognize straight off the bat, but his series of tweets, I guess, says that breaking news: per 4 senior DHS and Trump administration sources, a mass removal of ICE leadership around the country is underway, with up to 12 ICE field office chiefs being removed and reassigned in an effort to increase deportation numbers. How so? Well, he gets on to describing it, and so does Aaron. I'm told, says Bill, that the move is spearheaded by Corey Lewandowski, the other beneficiary of the 2 new private jets, of course, and a handful of the ICE chiefs will likely be replaced by Border Patrol and CBP officials, some of whom will be handpicked, if you can believe it, by aggressive and controversial Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino, who was just ordered to appear in court the other day, and I don't know what ended up happening with that one. I'm not certain whether the court date has come and gone or not, and whether he complied. I'm told some of the ICE leadership removed from their positions include the ICE field office directors in Los Angeles, Phoenix, Philadelphia, Denver, El Paso, San Diego, Seattle / Portland. I guess they throw them into one group there. And New Orleans. So, big happenings all over the country. And I guess the horrific scenes from all over the country, not horrific enough for the Trump administration. So while he's away in Japan, Corey Lewandowski will be president for this purpose. Border Patrol officials taking over ICE leadership positions would be extremely significant, as Border Patrol and ICE do different things. It's a good point. I mean, people forget that. We think of them as similar. But anyway, and I've done numerous ride-alongs / embeds with both, says Bill Melligan. Generally speaking, he's going to get right to it, ICE typically conducts very targeted operations, largely going after criminal illegal aliens. Ooh, scary. Or those with deportation orders, i.e. the ones that Trump campaigned on getting. Well, I mean, he actually campaigned on getting rid of everybody. But when people would get critical about it and say, now you're going to be focusing on those criminals first, right? Oh, yeah, sure. There aren't enough of them to raise anywhere near the numbers that he was promising to deport during his campaign. So it's really still foolish to say, but you campaigned on getting rid of the well, you said maybe you were going to do that first, but you didn't say you were going to stop with them. Anyway, so again, ICE targeted operations, usually going after people with criminal records or deportation orders, but almost always knowing who they are targeting for arrest, often conducting surveillance to learn their schedules before and waiting hours before arresting them if needed. Border Patrol, under Trump 2.0, while sometimes doing their own targeted operations, has been extremely aggressive. They're the ones you're seeing all over the place, and has been at the forefront of some of the most controversial immigration enforcement operations we've seen so far, carrying out roving patrols in Los Angeles, Chicago, etc., often at Home Depot, probably, of course, at Stephen Miller's insistence, car washes, flea markets, etc., leading to a handful of federal judges around the country issuing injunctions against them. The majority of the viral videos you see online are Border Patrol agents, including the use of a Trojan horse-style Penske moving truck at a Los Angeles Home Depot, an operation organized by Bovino. ICE often gets blamed for what Border Patrol does. That's true. As the media and activists often cannot tell the difference between federal agents, usually because they're not even in uniform, and everyone is called ICE. I'm told there are growing concerns about the political and PR fallout associated with some of the roving patrols Border Patrol is conducting as lawsuits continue to stack up and midterms approach next year. But again, if you should not take that mention to mean that, or you shouldn't think that they're getting rid of the Border Patrol guys. Yeah, you're giving us bad PR. We want to move more towards the ICE model of targeted raids. No, I don't think that. I mean, I guess there are probably people who are concerned with the PR, but they're not the ones in control of who's getting fired and who's getting replaced and who's doing the replacing. I'm told there is a significant friction within different wings of DHS and the administration. With border czar Tom Homan, remember him? He got $50,000. But that's from last year. So it doesn't count in the first 6 months of this year. It's no 800 million, but okay. Anyway, border czar Tom Homan and ICE Director Todd Lyons preferring to prioritize targeting criminal aliens and, quote, the worst of the worst, or those with deportation orders, while DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, the dog shooter, Corey Lewandowski, the dog shooter's boyfriend, and I guess substitute president for the time being, and BP Commander Bovino, Border Patrol, not British Petroleum, prefer to use the aggressive tactics to arrest anyone in the U.S. illegally or just nearby, including but not limited to criminals, to ramp up deportation numbers and achieve President Trump's promises of mass deportations. I am hearing from both sides of this friction. Ooh, there's two sides. I love it. One senior DHS official tells me, ICE started with the worst of the worst, knowing every target they are hitting, but since Border Patrol started in LA in June, we've, DHS, lost our focus, going too hard too fast with limited prioritization. It's getting numbers, but at what cost? Border Patrol agents I've talked to defend their tactics, with one telling me, what did everyone think mass deportations meant? Only the worst? Tom Homan has said it himself. Anyone in the U.S. illegally is on the table. And also if you're nearby or just filming it. Right. We'll be giving you more after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. Hey, here I am, everybody. Hey, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show, including to me. Mentally coming back to the show. I'm just looking up a few extra items that I think I can throw in to fill in details, but I want to return to the posts I was reading from, I don't even remember anymore, but that had been sent along describing the changes in leadership at ICE and the leadership conducting the mass deportations under the broader DHS umbrella, I guess. It's very unclear who's in command of this thing at this point. But we were reading from screen caps from the Twitter posts, I believe, of Bill Melligan, whose screen caps were captured by Aaron Reichlin, Reichlin, or hyphen Melnick, just to make it even more difficult to actually tell you what's going on here, who himself has pointed out his own observations on this situation. Where we left off, I believe, was Border Patrol agents, the more aggressive guys, being put in charge of this taking over from ICE that preferred to do more targeted operations, and saying to reporters like Bill Melligan, or Melugin, however it's pronounced, what did everyone think mass deportations meant? Only the worst? Tom Homan has said it himself, as though that was a source to be believed. Anyone in the U.S. illegally is on the table. And that table, by the way, is for waterboarding. It's quite a situation, these screen caps finally conclude, as both sides of this are on the same team with the same end goals, but different perspectives on how to get there. It sounds familiar. Once we had politics that way, but now we don't. That now describes how different federal cops fight with one another over how to beat up brown people. Okay, another DHS official confirmed the personnel changes to me on deep background, adding that the moves are based on performance and doing what is needed to achieve the best results, whatever that might mean. That means the most number of brown people hurt, of course. Official statements given to Fox News via Tricia, Ohio. You tell me who that is. I don't know. Look it up. While we have no personnel changes to announce at this time, the Trump administration remains laser focused on delivering results and removing violent, criminal, illegal aliens from this country. But I, of course, think everybody brown is a violent, criminal alien. So anyway, now Aaron, commenting on all of that, puts the siren, or rather the dome light emoji up here. Big changes happening. ICE leadership is being purged tonight. The old guard, which prioritized targeted enforcement operations aimed at people with criminal records, is being replaced with Border Patrol and Gregory Bovino's Midway Blitz style. Think things are bad now? It'll get worse. And there are a few other comments going along with it. Other outlets are now reporting, he says. First to report tonight was Anna Giaratelli at the Washington Examiner, but Washington Examiner kind of sucks, so I don't really want to use that, whose story, if anything, missed how big the purge was. It's not just 5 cities. ICE field office directors are being fired in at least a dozen cities and will be replaced by CBP people instead. Although it's not clear to me, like, replaced, you mean they're fired from ICE? Or is DHS opening field offices and saying this was an ICE field office, but now it's going to be a CBP field office instead, so you're in charge, or are they establishing temporary offices of some kind that are umbrella organizations, and instead of having an ICE person at the head of it, they'll have a Border Patrol person at the head of it? It's not clear, and I don't think Washington Examiner is going to make it clear either. But all right, let's see. There's a link to that one. He also then goes on to say NBC has a story on this as well. That's the one I grabbed. And they've got an indicative quote as to how things will go. And we'll find that quote when we read through the piece. The mentality is, this is the quote, CBP does what they're told, and the administration thinks ICE isn't getting the job done. One of the DHS officials said, so CBP will do it. And I guess that too here. I guess what it really means is probably the Inspector General and or General Counsel for ICE counseling, caution, let's make sure that we have legal cause to do what we are doing. And a CBP saying, let's all just depend on the president pardoning us if we don't think we actually have authorization to do what we're doing, and we'll do things that way. All right. So then there's the NBC News article. We'll read that one. But just, I guess, to follow up on Aaron's thoughts here, this continues this thread. This, he says, is the reason why I have consistently tried to emphasize that Border Patrol and ICE are different agencies with different duties and different leadership and different styles. Border Patrol are the aggro cowboys compared to ICE, who are, by the way, of course, aggro cowboys. Now they're going to be the ones running the show. My question remains, what show is this? But we'll see whether NBC can help us with that. Also, he continues on, note that the person making all these decisions is not Secretary Noem. She's too busy decorating her new jets, I guess. It's Corey Lewandowski, who has, I don't even know if he has an official role there, but his real role is live-in boyfriend to Secretary Noem and has therefore assumed this task, which is weird because, at this day and age, women should be able to conduct themselves in this role without, men actually doing it and pretending that the women are doing it. But I guess she's a trad wife, so she's kind of into doing things that way. I don't know. Anyway, it's Corey Lewandowski in charge of all of this, who is still a, quote, special government employee, interestingly enough, even though that time should have come and gone. The limitation on his service in that capacity should be over with, and they'll have to come up with a new excuse. But, that would be up to a court to enforce. So, la-di-da, that ain't happening. But it says he is still a special government employee, and Aaron goes on to add parenthetically, and by many reports, sleeping with Noem and running the agency while she does mostly TV. Yeah, I have heard that. As well as Gregory Bovino himself running sort of on his own out there. This he includes a screen grab from I don't know what, probably the same, maybe the same NBC article. We'll see. It's unattributed here. We'll see whether this passage turns up there. There's more. Aaron continues to say, well, it's too soon to tell exactly how this will change ICE operationally. Suffice to say that when you combine this with the massive surge in new recruits, yuck, surge, bad usage of the word, the institutional culture of the agency may be forever changed toward a far more aggressive militarized posture, i.e., I would guess. I've always envisioned Bovino as the head peacekeeper that shows up in District 12 to enforce order in one of the later Hunger Games movies. A clear the square guy, you know him. Well, and lots of comparisons being made to those peacekeepers these days, and I think that was intentional. Anyway, where were we here? Yes, Bill Mellon got more details, but Anna G. at the Examiner broke the story. And ruined it as well by writing it up in the Examiner, of course. Worth noting also that Bill is clearly telegraphing the message that the rank and file at ICE are not happy about that. Well, boo-hoo. What are you going to do? This is going to be a good time for reporters to get inside stories from disgruntled ICE staff. And he includes in this a quote from a post from Timothy Burke, who says, I think it's extremely noteworthy that the reporter breaking this is Fox's Border Patrol cheerleader, whose primary job is not to report news, but to cast Border Patrol in a positive light. Good point there, too. I think we can jump out of the thread at this point and maybe head over to the NBC article, see what they have for us. Remember the headline here, Trump plans to install Border Patrol officials to lead a more aggressive migrant crackdown. Subheader, the White House has approved a list of ICE leaders to be replaced by Border Patrol officials in coming days amid disappointment with arrest numbers. That sounds like Stephen Miller all over. Julia Ainsley and Laura Strickler are the reporters for NBC. And here's what they've got for us. The Trump administration is planning to replace some regional leaders at Immigration and Customs Enforcement with Border Patrol officials in an attempt to intensify its mass deportations effort amid growing frustration with the pace of daily arrests, which is, I think, plenty as is. According to 2 Homeland Security Department officials, 1 former DHS official, and 1 federal law enforcement official. Again, still looking for the details here. It's not clear to me whether they're just saying, I need new leaders at ICE. We're going to take them from Border Patrol and either put in new people at Border Patrol or just say you're the director of both, which is something that Trump does all the time. You have 9 jobs. We'll see. Trump's top aides have welcomed Border Patrol's more aggressive tactics to secure arrests, such as rappelling into apartment buildings from Black Hawk helicopters. I don't know if that's really more effective. Certainly not more cost effective, but what they're after is flashy video to use for social media content, and I guess in that sense they've done better. And of course, jumping out of rental trucks in Home Depot parking lots, not nearly as cool as rappelling out of Black Hawk helicopters, I gotta tell you, but I'm sure it's cheaper. Anyway, they've become disappointed with ICE, the officials said. The mentality is CBP does what they're told, doesn't check on the legality of it. And the administration thinks ICE isn't getting the job done, one of the DHS officials said. So CBP will do it. And that's an interesting dance around the outside of the normal follow-up, the one you expected when you say, well, the mentality is the CBP does what they're told. ICE doesn't. So that's interesting. But they, instead of putting it that way, they said, well, ICE is, they're not getting the job done. Whatever it is, bottom line, they're not getting the job done, i.e. they're following the law or a more reasonable policy, a more defensible policy, and that's making us sad and unhappy. The White House has signed off, allegedly, Trump doesn't really do anything, has signed off on a list of at least a dozen directors of ICE field officers who are set to be reassigned in the coming days. The two DHS officials, the former DHS official and federal law enforcement official said, those are the sources, they said that at least half of them would be replaced with Border Patrol officials. ICE has 25 field offices around the country, so the move could replace nearly half the agency's leaders. The list, compiled by Corey Lewandowski, a special government employee at DHS who advises Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in various ways, you might say, and Greg Bovino, the Border Patrol sector chief overseeing the agency's operations in Chicago and previously in L.A., the law enforcement official said. The administration's shift to leaning more heavily on Border Patrol marks a potential new phase in Trump's deportation efforts. Really? While ICE has come under criticism for its raids, the agency's broad approach has been to make targeted arrests of immigrants known to be in the country illegally. Border Patrol's approaches to recent arrests in major U.S. cities has been more aggressive, making large sweeps that have sparked some of the sharpest backlash from protesters and prompted lawsuits. But let's do more. The New York Times was first to report that the Trump administration was planning a shakeup of ICE leadership amid frustration over arrest numbers, citing 3 people familiar with the plans. No intention here of giving that story credit to the Washington Examiner, I guess. As of late September, the latest period for which data is available due to the government shutdown, our other continuing story, ICE was arresting 1,178 on average per day. But unfortunately for them, I guess, that's well short of the 3,000 per day that the chief architect of Trump's deportation policy, and they do say that is Stephen Miller, it's far short of the 3,000 he's demanded. The Department of Homeland Security did not respond to a request for comment. Asked about plans to reassign ICE leaders, White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson said in a statement, something, blah, blah, blah. The president's entire team working in lockstep, implement the agenda, tremendous results, securing the border, criminal illegal aliens, da-da-da-da-da. There you go. Really, that's all it is. It's garbage. Border Patrol has deployed over 1,500 agents to arrest immigrants in cities around the country to assist with deportations. Now, how is 1,500 deployed agents supposed to arrest 3,000 people a day? I really don't know. But Border Patrol Chief Mike Banks told NBC News that there are 1,500 of them out there. By comparison, there are 8,500 officers working for ICE's enforcement and removal operations. Border Patrol has been behind some of the most searing images of immigration arrests since Trump took office earlier this month in Chicago. They did the Black Hawk helicopter thing, as mentioned. Last week, videos emerged from Chicago of Bovino throwing a gas canister into a crowd. I've been thinking about how often he gets photographed actually mixing it up and throwing gas canisters, wrestling people to the ground, etc. And so that I thought about it in terms of when they subpoenaed him to appear in court. Ordinarily, I think the administration would probably be saying, you can't make him come in. He's not doing it. He's a desk jockey. He directs all this stuff. He's not physically bringing anybody in, but he is. So it's fine to have him answer for aggressive street tactics. It was fine to have him answer for him even as a desk jockey. But the fact that he goes out and does these arrests himself makes it all the more important and all the more reasonable to call him in, I think. Anyway, the incident of his throwing a gas canister into a crowd is now part of a lawsuit accusing the Trump administration of using overly aggressive tactics. Bovino has been ordered before a federal judge in Illinois on Tuesday. There we go. That's today. We'll see what happens today. To face questions on whether recent arrest tactics in the Chicago area, including using tear gas, violated a temporary restraining order against CBP's use of excessive force. Of course, it does, I believe. I was given to believe that the order was that they not use tear gas and that they all keep their body cams on in order to prevent them from trying to do it on the sly. But they have, 1, not been turning on their body cams, and 2, throwing tear gas anyway. Gee whiz. Let's find out whether that violates a temporary restraining order. It does. Plaintiffs' attorneys have pointed to Bovino's personal use of tear gas as a potential violation of the judge's order, in the sense that it is one, but they need to go to court and get the court to say, yep, that is in fact a violation, just like everybody thought, and then it just becomes a regular violation, not a potential one. DHS Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs Tricia McLaughlin, one of the worst spokespeople in the administration, said Monday in a statement to NBC News that Bovino had been hit in the head by a rock. That's it. I'm just going to leave that there. I mean, as a child, probably. That's why he is the way he is. But they mean recently, which, you're dressed for battle. You're wearing armor. Clearly, you expected to be hit by rocks. And then it happened. We look forward to the American people viewing the footage, she said. And I could see people enjoying the footage. Sure, why not? Give the people what they want, Tricia. Some ICE leaders have quietly expressed dismay over Border Patrol's tactics in cities like Chicago and Los Angeles. The law enforcement official and 2 DHS officials said, I should maybe stop reading who the sources are on all of these things. You got some idea. They named them before. Anyway, 2 former ICE officials said ICE does not own some of the resources Border Patrol has, such as Blackhawks. The White House's frustration with ICE has been building for months. In mid-May, Miller told ICE's leaders that if they didn't start arresting 3,000 immigrants per day, he'd see that the leaders of the lowest performing regions were taken out of their positions, according to 2 of those sources. And that's what they're doing. So I guess, okay. At the time, a chance to use our sound effect. At the time, ICE Director Todd Lyons resisted the idea of firing ICE field directors. The 2 people who spoke with meeting attendees said the Trump administration has increasingly turned to Bovino to oversee Border Patrol operations targeting immigrants in major U.S. cities, most recently in Chicago, where Bovino arrived in mid-October and became the public face of the Trump administration's enforcement efforts there. The DHS official said Bovino does not report to the chief of Border Patrol or CBP's commissioner, as other Border Patrol sector chiefs do. The law enforcement official said Bovino reports directly to Noam, who called him the Border Patrol commander-at-large in a recent op-ed. So it's not even clear who he is, what his role is, how he got it, whether or not it's legal, whether it's a real role or not. It's very interesting. Should make for a good hearing today. While the list of ICE field office directors that may soon be removed was compiled by Lewandowski and Bovino, he was in on it. It is also being tightly held within the White House by Miller, the DHS officials said. The officials did not know the names of the individuals on the list, but said they're expected to be the directors whose regions are underperforming, allegedly, in arrest numbers, or those who have pushed back on some of the more aggressive tactics that Miller supports and the Border Patrol has conducted. So, all right, you're all getting fired, then you'll go without a federal paycheck, and you can't be reassigned into anything during a shutdown. So, boo-hoo, you signed up with the wrong guys, or stayed on to work with the wrong guys, and now they are screwing you. Leopard, have a face. Should be delicious. All right, time to head back to Instapaper and find some of the other fun items for you to consider. Here's a speculative item, I guess. It's not, in fact, happening, but just by way of, I guess, putting you in the headspace of the people inside the administration and those advising this administration, just as this story was telling you, about their mindset and who they're going to fire and replace them with and why. Here's a speculative piece from The Independent, the UK Independent. Top media analyst proposes, so, you don't really have to, doesn't have to happen in order for it to be an explosive story. Top media analyst proposes Comcast hire Charlie Kirk's widow. For what? Well, in the age of Barry Weiss, it could be anything, right? Comcast should hire Charlie Kirk's widow as editor-in-chief of both, somehow, NBC and CNN. We will really be in trouble at that point. So Charlie Kirk's widow could run NBC, CNN, and Barry Weiss in charge of CBS, and then pretty much there's just no news left at that point. Now, why? How? Is it real? No, not yet. Subheader says, sure, at first blush it sounds crazy. But Trump loves a deal, and Brian Roberts, who isn't anybody in the administration, needs to think big and differently, media analyst Rich Greenfield wrote this week. Who is Brian Roberts? I don't actually know. Well, let's see. Justin Baragona, reporting from New York for The Independent. What's going on here? And remember, it hasn't happened, may never happen, might not work at all. It's just some speculative thing that somebody thinks Trump would go for, and he might, but you have to wait and see, and then leave the country. A prominent media analyst, does that matter, is proposing an unorthodox solution for Comcast. What does Comcast need here? Why is Comcast supposedly interested in something? Or why does a consultant who might be, maybe wants to get hired or paid by Comcast, why does he think they would do such a thing? All right. Well, Comcast might want to win over Donald Trump's approval in its bid to purchase rival media giant Warner Brothers. That would be a major, and it's another one of those major media conglomerations that need, I guess, regulatory approval to come together. And we've seen how Trump has enjoyed leveraging that for his own gain. And I'm sure he'd like to do the same here, too. So, what's the proposal? Make the widow of slain right-wing activist Charlie Kirk the top editor of the merged company's news networks. Is she a reporter? I don't know. Does it matter? Don't know if it really does or not. According to Lightshed Partners' Rich Greenfield's latest column, Comcast chief Brian Roberts, there we are, could win Trump's heart. That's the quote. If he were to think outside the box and agree to appoint Erica Kirk to oversee CNN and NBC News once the administration approved the deal. And it's only when you see it in writing this way. Erica Kirk, spelled with a K. Erica, that is, spelled with a K. Kirk, of course, spelled with a K. In fact, spelled with two Ks, such that the relatively short name, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, there are 9 letters in the name Erica Kirk. 3 of them, exactly 3, are Ks. Take what you want from that. But there's a lot of Ks to see in a short space. But that's the idea. Appoint Erica Kirk to oversee CNN and NBC News once the administration approves the deal. Yes, you read that right. Where we're at, here's what, I guess, the quote from the idea, the proposal. Where we're at. Prominent media analyst. I don't know. By the way, both words, prominent and media, are capitalized. That might be his company name as well. Prominent media analyst Rich Greenfield argues that to get regulatory approval from the Trump administration in a WBD, Warner Brothers, Discovery, WBD acquisition, Comcast should bring in Turning Point USA's Erica Kirk to serve as the editor-in-chief of a combined CNN/NBC News. Semaphore media editor Max Tani, T-A-N-I, tweeted in reaction to Greenfield's column on Monday. So you see, this is a bit far-flung, but it's the kind of thing that if you get it on Fox News in front of the boss, especially when he's tired and disoriented flying around Japan, it might just take root. Doesn't have to take root with him, but if it takes root with him and he starts making phone calls, it starts taking root with other people. Greenfield's offbeat proposal comes amid Paramount Skydance's aggressive takeover bid of Warner Brothers Discovery, which has seen media mogul David Ellison, whose father is close Trump ally, it doesn't say that, but is close Trump ally and the world's second richest man, Larry Ellison, make 3 successive offers to purchase the company. Wow. So everybody wants to buy Warner Brothers Discovery for some reason. And then the piece is illustrated by a photo of Trump walking, not hand in hand, but touching nonetheless, with Erica Kirk at the White House. Looks like on the White House portico. It actually looks like she's helping him down the stairs, to be honest. Although I'm sure he'd like to think he's escorting her around. He's grabbed her essentially by the wrist or forearm. And she's smiling about it because it's great to get grabbed by the pussy guy. Anyway, while Ellison's merger bid has been repeatedly rebuffed by WBD and Warner Brothers head David Zaslav has publicly declared that his company is now for sale in an effort to court other suitors, The Paramount chief believes he has a, quote, Trump card in his quest to add to his burgeoning media empire. Who owns Warner Brothers Discovery is very important to the administration. A senior Trump administration official told the New York Post last week the Warner board needs to think very seriously not just on the price competition, but which player in the suitor pool has been successful getting a deal done, by which they mean would have the approval of Donald Trump and get all the exclusive stories, wink, wink. With any merger involving WBD and a large conglomerate facing major hurdles due to antitrust regulatory concerns, but F the law, Ellison has essentially told Warner's board of directors that Paramount is the only one that will have Trump's backing through the process. No less significant, sources close to Ellison say, is the fact that the president is said to privately loathe Brian Roberts, the chief executive of cable giant Comcast, who in many respects is the most logical rival bidder for WBD. The New York Post's Charles Gasparino reported Trump's disdain for Roberts is well known. Oh, that's good. As the president railed against the executive on social media and in the White House. Okay, so basically what's going on here before we even go any further, and really it's a long, lengthy article and might not be worth the rest of the time. Just want to throw out there, if that ever were to happen, you would be able to, and it'll take a while, but you'll be able to throw back to this and say, oh my God, I got a warning that might happen. It sounds rather unlikely, and it all hinges on, I guess, the Ellison deal not going through. So the major caveats there are you would be needing Trump administration approval to let a guy that Trump hates take over Warner Brothers Discovery. But I guess the idea here is this guy says if you were to say you would make Charlie Kirk's widow editor-in-chief of CNN and NBC in making this acquisition, he may get over the fact that he hates you personally and allow you to do that. Why would you write such a thing? So that you could collect a fee for suggesting it, I guess, essentially. So if this idea convinces Trump to allow the merger to go through for Comcast instead, everybody would be able to say, they hated you before, but now they allowed you to do this thing. It must be because of what I proposed. Not only should you do it, but you should give me $1 million for suggesting it. And they very well may. That's an easy payday to make. If you're able to put that deal together. So anyway, not something that you need to worry about tonight necessarily, but it was an interesting warning shot, I thought, for getting a grip on the Wild West nature of the landscape. Honestly, almost anything can happen. All right, we'll take a break here again and head back to a couple of the other stories that have been languishing over the past couple of days. And I'll take 1 minute to take a quick look through social media to see that Trump hasn't vomited on the Japanese prime minister or anything like that. I still think he can break that record if he tries hard enough. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Nothing super splashy that broke through in the 1 minute I gave myself to scan social media, but plenty of other things happening as well. Oh, well, let's see. Oh, more boat strikes, I guess. Okay, that's actually breaking news. I went to look at it, but the Blue Sky deck decided to move on. So let's see if I can't scroll back and actually find the thing. AP News, breaking news, the U.S. carried out 3 strikes on 4 alleged drug-running boats in the Eastern Pacific, Hegseth says, killing 14 and leaving 1 survivor. I guess that's the new trend, to leave the survivors. Okay, the lawn care folks have decided to chime in as well. So that's good news, a little bit of buzzing. Never hurt anybody, except, yes it did. It annoyed the hell out of me. All right, so I mean, at this point, you just have to keep a running total of all the number of boats and people killed so that you can point at it and say, but look how many people we're murdering. And then wait for a new administration that will allow something to be done about cleaning that up. But not happening with these guys. Plus, they just got another $800 million in their pocket. Anyway, that rather disturbing fact added to the mix. I'll just open that up so I can give you a link to that. And then scrolling forward, there are a couple of other items I want to make sure we don't totally skip by. but it's difficult to do as things are moving rapidly online. All right, let's see. This too deserves attention, although I think I've got another piece on it in Instapaper. But all right, time to get back to the news. I know it's difficult as I'm arranging these things in my head while I'm scanning them at the same time. This was an interesting headline, I guess, given the fact that Trump is overseas and acting erratically and more or less disintegrating before everyone's eyes. Interesting to see this headline at the New York Times: Trump, long erratic on the world stage, reaches a new level. And that is very sly for the New York Times, because they quickly, oh, no, it's not what you think. In the subheader, they say, whether because of his increasingly mercurial approach or despite it, President Trump has won some foreign policy victories in his second term. The question is whether he can build on his record. So it seems to me like it's supposed to be taken just as everybody took it as I read it. Right in the first instance, Trump, long erratic on the world stage, reaches a new level, like of being erratic. He's getting worse. He's reached a new level. Oh, well, if that's the case, then the administration is going to come down on us like a ton of bricks. So what we're going to say we mean he's reaching a new level of success. Oh, well, then it's okay. Now I'd be interested in seeing what the actual article says, because it's illustrated with a photo of him, looking droopy and listless on the plane, taking his plane gaggle time, and in fact reaching a new level of erraticness on the world stage. This is David E. Sanger reporting for the New York Times. And then they note that he has covered 5 American presidents in more than 4 decades at the New York Times. He often writes about superpower conflict, the subject of his latest book, which this may very well be promoting his book, but it sounds like his long tenure at the New York Times and his long experience reporting on presidents of many parties is supposed to excuse this sly wink analysis. 9 months into his term, President Trump's approach to allies, adversaries, and competitors around the world has proved a strange mix of successes, yay, you can let me keep reporting now, and increasingly frequent and erratic eruptions. Whether he is dealing with Canada or China, Venezuela or the Middle East, or the war for control of Ukraine. Without question, Mr. Trump has enjoyed some substantial second-term foreign policy victories. European allies are now on track to spend far more on their own defense than they imagined a year ago, something several presidents have demanded, but Mr. Trump forced. He has intervened to help diffuse a number of long-running regional conflicts. I solved 10 wars. Even if some of his claimed successes prove temporary or ephemeral, really. I would say. His biggest achievement to date, winning the freedom of 20 living hostages held by Hamas and a fragile ceasefire in Gaza, which has fallen apart 10 times, required forceful and skillful handling of his reluctant Israeli counterpart. But if anyone expected Mr. Trump to grow into the kind of global statesman that most of his predecessors sought to be remembered as, they have been sorely disappointed. Never known for consistency or niceties, Mr. Trump has only grown more capricious in his conduct of foreign policy, a tendency on full display as he begins to swing through Asia to confront a combative China and allies uncertain of what he wants or how to deal with him. Not great in terms of what allies are looking for. We don't know what he wants or how to deal with him. We don't know what he wants, and we don't know how to figure out what he wants. Great ally. The president has an instinctual feel for countries' vulnerabilities and pressure points, said Richard Fontaine, another great ally, right? Do you know how to help multiply our forces together as allies? No, but I know how to hurt you very badly. That's a great ally. Let's get that guy. You got no choice. That, according to Richard Fontaine, the chief executive of the Center for New American Security and former advisor to Senator John McCain. It's good news for him. This sometimes produces leverage he uses to productive ends, which we saw in Europe and Gaza and the Iran strike. Hey, those are productive. But it also has downsides, he casually mentions. Not long after a fruitful meeting with Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, Trump shut down trade talks in a peak on Friday because he did not like a Canadian television advertisement that featured the true voice of President Ronald Reagan from a 38-year-old radio speech warning of the long-term costs of tariffs. On Saturday, he went further, slapping an additional 10% tariffs on Canadian goods, a move that could cost American consumers billions simply because Mr. Trump was unhappy with the ad, which was created by the Ontario government. He reacted with fury, threats, and sky-high new tariffs this month when China announced new limits on U.S. access to much-needed rare earth minerals, but then tacoed and lowered the temperature as he headed to Malaysia on Friday night, telling reporters on Air Force One that both he and President Xi Jinping of China would have to make concessions this week to reach a trade deal. On Sunday, his negotiators announced progress. After campaigning on a platform of avoiding foreign entanglements, he dispatched a virtual armada to the Caribbean to put pressure on Venezuela and apparently seek the ouster of President Nicolas Maduro. We've kind of casually moved to that as the real motivation. He continues to turn up the military heat, dispatching an aircraft carrier to the region in recent days and striking at least 10 boats that he claimed, without disclosing evidence, were carrying drugs. Most legal experts say the summary killings of civilians, at least 43 are now dead, and I think we got another 14 to add to that total now, are without legal justification. But Mr. Trump refuses to provide Congress or the public a clear statement of his goal. Well, whatever. And so he has so whipsawed on Ukraine that European officials have repeatedly raced to Washington to understand whether Mr. Trump is siding with Putin or with Ukraine. We still don't know. If your negotiating position is, well, we'll do whatever works, of course you're going to get played. Whipsawed, said Celeste Wallander, a Russia expert who served as an assistant secretary of defense for international security until January, i.e. under Biden. This is what happens when you don't have grounding positions in a high-stakes international negotiation. You get a constant spiral of strange, changing positions. It's also what happens if you're on the other side, Anyway, more than 9 months into his second term, the only thing predictable about Trump's handling of global affairs is that it will be an unpredictable mix of instinct, grievance, and ego. And there's little evidence that his tantrums, swerves, and reversals are strategic and thought out, as his supporters sometimes insist, rather than the products of impulsivity, mood, and circumstance. This is how you get away with this. Put it in the 15th paragraph. It's a story about this, but with Trump, you got to do a headline that makes it sound like he's reaching new levels and got so many successes, and then his attention span is not long enough to get down to this paragraph. That's somebody else's job. Either way, foreign leaders and ambassadors know to remain wary at all times, with one saying the other day that he enters the Oval Office with the kind of caution needed if there were sticks of unexploded dynamite under the couch cushions. It's an idea. As he prepares to meet a new Japanese leader and Mr. Xi and his chocolate cake-loving ass. I don't know why his ass has to get involved in this, but what else are you going to say? Anyway, chocolate cake lover, connoisseur, most beautiful chocolate cake admirer in the world, Mr. Xi. And, of course, the new Japanese leader, right as he prepares to meet the two of them after he made a strange public plea to the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un to meet him, even though his last diplomacy was followed by a surge in the size of the North's nuclear arsenal. Mr. Trump is at something of a turning point. Can he build on the foreign policy successes he's had, or will his mercurial nature continue to generate confusion and conflict rather than results? Mr. Trump's blow-up with Canada started as he went into a rage on social media over the Ronald Reagan voiceover, but he also charged that Canada is trying to illegally influence the United States Supreme Court in one of the most important rulings in the history of our country, a reference to a case that the court will be hearing that weighs the legality of some of Mr. Trump's tariff moves. By the way, it occurs to me that we played that clip yesterday that Greg gave us of Ben Stein in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, teaching, playing the role of a history teacher, teaching a reluctant high school class about the history of the Smoot-Hawley tariffs and just about tariffs in general. We were remarking on how relevant it is to the current situation, although we focused mostly on the fact that, high school history teachers and economics teachers, I guess, have all, more or less decided to teach the reality of tariffs, that adding tariffs on top of already rising consumer prices can be inflationary. It can spark recession, or push a recession into depression, or push, in fact, I guess even make a generational event of depression. So, bad news economically in general, and that Ronald Reagan was of the generation that recognized that reality. And then, of course, that everybody else, even afterwards, would be raised in the same tradition. That this was supposed to be a recognizable high school scene. Oh, yeah, I, A, remember being bored in history class, and B, remember being bored specifically by being told something about tariffs and that was bad. And that's basically, the impression that everybody has come away with. Yeah, tariffs, actually not that great. Right. So there was that. But then it also occurred to me that the very first part of the clip, and I guess at this point, maybe I should just go back and grab the clip and just play the first couple seconds of it again, just to remind you of what was said. It's going to take us a few seconds to do that here. All right, here are the links, and then Greg sent us this thing. There we are, the Ben Stein bit here. Let's see if we can play it.
In 1930,
I know it's pretty low in volume here, but I'll pump it up just for a second. That's going to require some engineering, I guess. But all right, well, let's. What are we at here? Crank it up just a little here. I hope just a little, and see if we can get to this right in the first part. I'm only going to need a second or two, really, probably.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the the Great Depression, passed the the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which...
Okay. Anyway, yes, you get the idea. Hawley-Smoot, by the way, I don't know why I always remember to Smoot Hawley, but I suppose that's for their estates to fight out. Anyway, what I wanted to point out there is right at the beginning. How did those tariffs happen? Hawley-Smoot. Well, who are Hawley and Smoot? They're members of Congress. Again.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the
Great Depression. Right.
Passed the
Hawley-Smoot
Tariff bill.
Right. Got it. Okay. So the point there was, how did those tariffs come about? How, in fact, do tariffs come about constitutionally? Generally, they are passed by Congress. Typically, because they're such a bad idea, Republican-controlled Congresses. But this time, we have a Republican-controlled Congress that had nothing to do with the tariffs that were imposed. The president simply imposed them by himself under the guise of a emergency of some sort. So, a lesson we skipped over entirely, but that should have been very plain, that back in the day when there was law, the way you had tariffs imposed was when the Congress imposed them. But that's not the case anymore. So that's a lesson that we forgot to emphasize from yesterday's use of this very understated and low-key clip, not only because Ben Stein is a low-key and understated kind of guy, but because the volume is way lower than we were hoping for. All right, so to turn this back down to where things were, just so that all the rest of the levels aren't off, let's get back here to the New York Times piece that we were reading. Right, he's mad about Canada, saying that Canada is trying to illegally influence the United States Supreme Court in one of the most important rulings in the history of our country. That is to say, the Supreme Court will be considering, hey, is it even constitutional for the president to do this? Well, Ben Stein let you know yesterday, and we reminded you today, that's not the way it's supposed to work. The president now says he may attend the court session when it hears the case, interestingly, to lean on them and I say, I can have you thrown out of a Black Hawk helicopter into the ocean if you don't rule my way. Wink, wink, or something like that. Canadian officials say the intent was not to influence the court. It was to remind Republicans that their party had departed from Reagan's beliefs and was ignoring his warnings. But Mr. Trump has not worried much recently about interfering in another country's judicial process. Less than 2 weeks ago, he stood in the Knesset, Israel's parliament, and in a diversion from an hour-long speech celebrating the hostage release, urged that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu be pardoned in an ongoing criminal case. And he has not dwelled on his decision to impose 50% tariffs on Brazil because it has, in his words, conducted a witch hunt by putting the former president, Jair Bolsonaro, a Trump friend, on trial, charging him with trying to stage a coup to prevent the current president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, from taking office in 2022. You know, like what happened here. Then there are the strikes in the Caribbean and the Pacific, which seem likely to accelerate once the Gerald R. Ford carrier group is on station off Venezuela in a few weeks, a move ordered on Friday. It's interesting, though, to post the Gerald R. Ford there. Remember, our long national nightmare is over. Thanks, Gerald R. Ford. But while the Pentagon amasses firepower, roughly a seventh of the Navy's active fleet will be near Venezuela when the Ford arrives, the White House will not declare what its strategic objectives are in the buildup. Not only will they not declare war or ask Congress to do it, they won't even say why they're there exactly. Just as he won't say why exactly he's supposed to get $230 million from the Justice Department. Anyway, officials publicly say the operation is to stop the flow of cocaine and fentanyl, but U.S. officials privately concede they are part of a larger drive to oust Mr. Maduro, Venezuela's authoritarian leader, because you can't have authoritarians. And then there is Ukraine, where Mr. Trump has swerved from repeating Russian talking points to floating the idea of giving Ukraine powerful Tomahawk missiles, only to change his mind. In July, just before meeting with Putin in Alaska, Trump agreed with his European allies that the most vital step was to obtain a ceasefire so that the guns would be quiet while negotiations finally took place. But as soon as he got to the American air base in Anchorage, he said he and the Russian leader had agreed that what was needed was a full peace agreement. Ceasefires can be broken, he explained. Only a full peace accord would suffice. Then he went to Israel and said, ceasefire will be just fine. European leaders rushed to Washington, gathering around the president in the Oval Office to get him back on track. When there was no follow-on negotiation for a peace accord, Trump declared that he thought it was possible Ukraine could gain back all the land it lost to Russia in the 2022 invasion, arguing that the Russians were in big economic trouble and could not fight. Then, he said, he was nearly persuaded to give Tomahawks to Ukraine that could reach deep inside Russia, but a well-timed phone call from Putin convinced him that this would lead to escalation with the Russians. Because Putin is Russian, of course, and he backed off. When Mr. Zelensky arrived in Washington last week, Trump insisted that a ceasefire, what he rejected 2 months before, was the only option, freezing the fighting at current lines. Let it be cut the way it is, he said, referring to the parts of the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine that Russia now occupies. In private, he warned Mr. Zelensky that your country will be destroyed over time by Russia, according to a senior Ukrainian official, the opposite of what he had said a few weeks before. The meeting with Putin that the president said would happen in Budapest in a few weeks disappeared, leading the president to impose his first sanctions on Russian oil exports. White House officials hailed it as a significant moment. Remember one of the big significant victories? But it was the first time Mr. Trump had added to the thousands of sanctions imposed on Russia after its invasion on Ukraine in February of 2022, but they declined to say what had changed since the spring when Mr. Trump exempted Russia from most of his tariffs. The driving force of this roller coaster, said Ivo Dalder, I hope that's close to the correct pronunciation, of a former U.S. ambassador to NATO. It is the president's desire to be seen as the one who ends the war. He doesn't care how it ends or with what consequences, only that it ends and supports his claim to a Nobel effing Peace Prize. The effing is not part of the quote, of course, but, probably deserves to be. That's the guy we've sent over to Japan to walk around in circles in the protocol room. And, circles are happening anyway, even though it's a square room. So there you go. There's more. Something else I guess I wanted to add to the mix that we might be able to shoehorn in here. Back to the courtrooms. A piece by Chris Geidner, which really sounded like it would be well worth our time. A piece he's entitled "The Kavanaugh Stop." 50 days later. You've heard of people using this terminology for what is now, properly being called the Kavanaugh Stop. This essentially coming from Kavanaugh's offhand conclusion during one of the, I think, emergency docket hearings on whether or not it was okay for federal officers to just stop people based on what they think is, I guess, their racial profiling of people. Well, you look brown, the chances are you're an illegal alien and we can arrest and expel you. And we're going to just stop you because of that. Now, if we ask if you're a United States citizen and you say yes and prove it to us, we'll let you go. So eventually, maybe after 6 weeks, I don't know, maybe we're shipping you to 7 different countries or trying to put you in Africa for some reason because it's the only place that we can save face by deporting you to at this point. But basically, Kavanaugh saying, look, after it's a brief encounter, you prove that you're a citizen. What's the difference? Why is that such a big imposition on people's rights? Well, I don't know. Except we're going to be calling it the Kavanaugh Stop. And it is now, I guess, 50 days since issuing that non-ruling ruling. And Chris Geidner taking a look back at, hey, how's that going? The Kavanaugh Stop 50 days later. What a sick world, it says here as a quote in the subheader. We'll have to find out who says that. Let's see. And he starts with a screen grab of the Supreme Court's decision on the application for a stay in the case of Kristi Noem versus Pedro Vasquez Perdomo et al. On an application for a stay back on September 8th, 2025. And the highlighted note here, Justice Kavanaugh concurring in the grant of the application for the stay. I vote to grant the government's application for an interim stay pending appeal of the district court's injunction. And again, the claim that what's the big deal, essentially? If you can be let go once you prove you're a citizen, why are we concerned about just stopping brown people because they're brown? Golly. Tuesday, today, will be 50 days since the U.S. Supreme Court's Republican appointees issued an order allowing the Trump administration, essentially, to target working-class Latinos in its massive immigration raids. Not the fanjools, by the way. No, can't target them. 50 days since the Kavanaugh Stop was authorized, although the practice certainly preceded the September 8th order. The High Court's order blocked a temporary restraining order that had been issued in July by U.S. District Judge Mame Ewusi Mensah. Oh, I'm sorry. Golly, there's more to the name here. It's Judge Frimpong, essentially, but it's a long name, and I missed a part of it. My cursor was over it. And it, by the way, not a Trump-appointed judge. You might have guessed. Probably appointed by a president who was more concerned with the idea that people who have names like that find themselves always in front of judges that are very skeptical of their situation. And wouldn't it be best for the administration of justice in this country if some of the people who had to live with that kind of second glance and discrimination, and who were also qualified jurists, got the chance to sit in judgment of these things once in a while too? Sounded like a good idea to normal people, but not to Trump. Again, District Judge Maame, first name Mame Ewusi Mensah Frimpong. I know that'll drive the MAGA types up a pole. Anyway, he's sitting in federal court in Los Angeles. And I don't even know if I've gendered this correctly or not. Under the TRO, the Trump administration was simply barred from using only some combination of a person's race or ethnicity, the fact that they speak Spanish or have an accent, and the type of work they do and where they were found to detain someone. In other words, it wasn't that radical a decision. I'm sure that Trump went around saying, a radical, crazy left-wing judge. The judge was only saying, you got to have something more than just the fact that somebody's brown and has an accent and is coming from a service job in order to detain them. That's all. That's all we're asking. And they said, actually, no, to hell with that. If you're allowed to leave from the encounter quickly, if you prove that you're a citizen, then it's okay. And of course, what Chris is getting at here is that time and time again, even that isn't what they're doing. Well, if you can end the encounter quickly by proving you're a citizen, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that by proving you're a citizen quickly, it doesn't help you at all. You often, in some cases, end up in custody for days or even weeks anyway. Has that changed Kavanaugh's mind? No, because they haven't brought him any other cases. Would it change his mind if they did? Probably not, because F everything.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. As it happens, in the middle of reading you this piece about Chris Geidner's view of the Kavanaugh stop 50 days later, I see a longtime state government reporter Joe Sonka putting up on posting on Blue Sky with a link to Geidner's piece that there's another story he's covering that this is an example of what's now known as a Kavanaugh stop. What's the example? His own piece, I think, or no, I'm pointing to the work at the Houston Chronicle, I guess, I'm sorry. But Joe pointing out here, a U.S.-born Houston man says ICE agents beat him and his father during an early morning stop. And, you know, what's the problem, asks Justice Kavanaugh, if after proving your citizenship after a brief encounter, you're on your way, just a couple of welts or broken bones along the way, what's the issue? All right. Well, let me get back to Chris Geidner's telling of it, if I can, identify which of the 10 tabs I have open is it. Right. Okay. He was reminding us that today will be 50 days since the Supreme Court Republican appointees issued an order allowing the Trump administration to target working class Latinos in its massive immigration raids. Again, at the district court level, the judge just said, listen, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order that requires that if you're going to stop people, you do so on some more evidence than just apparent race or ethnicity, speaking Spanish or speaking English with an accent, presence at a particular location, for instance, a bus stop. Well, there you go. A car wash, a tow yard, a day laborer pickup site, an agricultural site, etc., or the type of work one does. Those things in any combination insufficient by themselves to make one of these stops, considering that they can end in detention for days or weeks at a time or a severe beating. Don't you think there really ought to be more to it? Well, if there was more, even under this temporary restraining order, the administration could detain a person. But if some combination of those factors was all that justified the administration's suspicion, no detention would be allowed under this judge's temporary restraining order. Well, that was too much of a restriction on Trump's executive branch authority for the Republican appointees of this Supreme Court, although Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett wrote nothing to explain themselves. It's interesting. The reason this is going to end up as a Kavanaugh stop is Kavanaugh was foolish enough to open his mouth about this. He should have just kept quiet and they just say, why is this the law? Because the Supreme Court says so. Which one of you? Shut up. Get out of here. The application for a stay, the court's order simply stated, is granted. Although all three Democratic appointees spoke out through a dissent written by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the only Republican appointee to write anything that day was Justice Brett Kavanaugh, a, as you know, privileged white East Coast elite lawyer who attended private schools and would not be subject to the law enforcement operation he was okaying. Kavanaugh, appointed to the Supreme Court by Trump in the president's first term, provided an underwhelming and heavily criticized justification for the decision, with a couple of links to those heavy criticisms. By being the only justice who supported the decision who wrote anything, he has, whether he wanted to or not, become the face of this racist decision. Enter the Kavanaugh stop. Under this court's precedents, not to mention common sense, those circumstances taken together, this is the quote from Kavanaugh's writing, under this court's precedents, not to mention common sense, those circumstances taken together can constitute at least reasonable suspicion of illegal presence in the United States. I guess those four things that in combination really, according to the district judge, did not constitute real reason. But importantly, reasonable suspicion means only that immigration officers may briefly stop the individual and inquire about immigration status. If the person is a U.S. citizen or otherwise lawfully in the United States, that individual will be free to go after the brief encounter. Only if the person is illegally in the United States may the stop lead to further immigration proceedings, or beatings, as we found out later on. In one particularly indefensible sentence that followed, Kavanaugh simply pushed the Fourth Amendment to the wayside. This is how he did it. Moreover, as for stops of those individuals who are legally in the country, the questioning in those circumstances is typically brief, and those individuals may promptly go free after making clear to the immigration officers that they are U.S. citizens or otherwise legally in the United States. And of course, all 50 days since then, and of course for many days before this so-called ruling was issued, it wasn't really a ruling, but this administrative stay was issued, that's not been the case in the main for quite some time. Although he went on to note that the issue before the court was not about the use of force, and that remedies should be available in federal court for any excessive force because the Fourth Amendment prohibits such action, that after-the-fact remedy, even if available, is not an answer, as became abundantly clear in the weeks since. Turn around or you're going to get the dog. Frank Miranda, a U.S. citizen born in California, was told by ICE agents in Portland on October 2nd, and of course captured on video. That's how we know it. According to a letter from a lawyer he later hired to represent him, Miranda, ironically enough, his name is, Miranda was detained, put in cuffs, struck from behind, taken to an ICE facility, and eventually released with no explanation. But, all you got to do is be a U.S. citizen and you can be on your way. I mean, after a week or so. Here's the letter, quoted. Mr. Miranda continued to explain to ICE officers that he was an American citizen. That's what Kavanaugh said he had to do in order to be let go and on his way in a few minutes. The ICE officers responded by threatening Mr. Miranda with serious physical injury, stating, "We're going to put you in cuffs or you're going to get the dog." ICE officers then confiscated Mr. Miranda's cell phone, handcuffed him, struck him forcefully from behind, causing him to collapse, and abducted him in an unmarked van. Mr. Miranda was driven against his will to the ICE building at 4310 South Macadam Avenue, Portland, Oregon. And the zip code, by the way, if you want to write him a letter, 97239. After several hours, Mr. Miranda was driven back to his place of employment without being given any legitimate reason for his abduction. But he got in and out in a day. But remember, Kavanaugh said it was all okay because it would be a brief encounter. He was in irons for hours. 1 month after the court's order and Kavanaugh's opinion were issued, I asked Justice Kavanaugh on October 8th, do you have any comment on the ICE detention of Frank Miranda, a U.S. citizen who was reportedly threatened, struck, and detained despite being a U.S. citizen? Around the same time, Maria Greeley, a U.S. citizen born in Illinois, was told by ICE agents in Chicago. And remember, ICE agents, if they were ICE rather than Border Patrol, are supposed to be the more restrained of the bunch, now being replaced because of that. She told ICE agents, or was told by ICE agents, that she didn't look like a Greeley. Well, I am Latina and I am a service worker. I fit the description of what they're looking for now, Greeley told the Chicago Tribune. As the Tribune detailed, the 44-year-old woman, quote, had just finished working a double shift at the Beach Bar on Ohio Street earlier this month when she was surrounded by 3 federal agents who grabbed her, forced her hands behind her back, and zip-tied her. Kavanaugh wasn't there to help her, I guess. I asked Justice Kavanaugh on October 14th, do you have any comment on the ICE stop of Maria Greeley, a U.S. citizen who was reportedly stopped, zip-tied, and told she didn't look like a Greeley despite being a U.S. citizen? On both occasions, I also asked Kavanaugh whether he still thinks he was correct when he wrote that those stops are, quote, typically brief, and that all of this is fine because individuals may promptly go free after making clear to the immigration officers that they are U.S. citizens or otherwise legally in the United States. Well, no answer there, of course. Finally, I asked Kavanaugh if he was aware that the Kavanaugh stop terminology, or is he aware of the fact that people use that terminology, and whether he had any comment on that. Kavanaugh, of course, has not responded to either inquiry when, on October 16th, ProPublica published an in-depth report identifying more than 50 Americans who were held after immigration agents questioned their citizenship since Trump retook office. So I asked Justice Kavanaugh on October 16th, do you have any comment on the ProPublica report that found more than 50 Americans who were held after immigration agents questioned their citizenship during 2025? They were almost all Latino, per the report. In addition to the other questions previously raised, I also asked Kavanaugh whether the possibility of after-the-fact excessive force claims is a sufficient answer to this ongoing, regularly recurring problem. I have not received a response from him or his chambers. On Friday, David Beer, the director of immigration studies at the Cato Institute, shared a video of U.S. Border Patrol officers outside of a Walmart in Cicero, Illinois, following and confronting a woman leaving her car, asking her, were you born here? Were you born here, ma'am? What country were you born in? What a sick world, he wrote. That is a Kavanaugh stop. That's right. Easily identifiable. And by the way, Joe Sonka doing the same. He just said this is an example of what's known now as a Kavanaugh stop. It is in reference to a piece in the Houston Chronicle in which U.S.-born teen says ICE agents beat him and his father during an early morning stop. Can I read Houston Chronicle articles? This one I can. U.S.-born Houston teen says, well, I can do it temporarily, of course, before the pop-ups stop me. U.S.-born Houston teen says ICE agents beat him and his father during early morning stop. Julian Aguilar, staff writer at the Houston Chronicle, reports on this one. And here are the basics. Houston teenager who is a U.S. citizen was beaten, choked, and subjected to racial slurs when masked officers chased him and his father in an early morning immigration enforcement action, a local immigrant rights group said on Monday. Arnaldo Bazan, 16. You have any comment on that, Justice Kavanaugh? Of course, Justice Kavanaugh is familiar with rough handling of other 16-year-olds. Was on his way to school on Thursday. Good time to do this. When an unmarked car pulled his father, Arnulfo Bazan, and the teen over. The teenager said during a news conference that he and his dad were pulled over by a car with no indication that it belonged to law enforcement. How they pulled over, I don't know whether they were just blocked by this car bumped, threatened, no clear indication yet. The officers who approached did not identify themselves as law enforcement and wore uniforms that bore no official insignia, he added. Their vests, they didn't say police or ICE, nothing. And that's when me and my dad got scared because they started hitting our window, trying to open the door, Arnaldo Bazan said. Me and my dad went to fight or flight mode and we just backed away. He's an educated kid, fight or flight mode. The father and son tried to flee and were eventually stopped by other vehicles. When they ran from the car, Bazan said the agents tackled them in a restaurant supply store. Oh, obviously one of those locations which it's okay to arrest people. The incident occurred near the intersection of South Gessner Road and Beechnut Street. That's the local angle here. I saw they started choking him, kicking him, punching him, Bazan said. It's when I reacted. I just ran to my dad and another agent grabbed my shirt. I didn't hit nobody. I didn't do nothing to nobody. I was just standing there recording on my phone and they took my phone. And that's when they tackled me and said I was underage. Oh, I said I was underage. Okay. And the dude started choking me more. Bazan said they were taken to a nearby parking lot where agents called him and his dad a racial slur and a border hopper. Bazan was eventually released after a few hours. His father remains in ICE custody in Conroe. A spokesperson for the Office of Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Houston did not immediately respond to questions from the Houston Chronicle about how agents are required to identify themselves, why Arnaldo Bazan's phone was taken, and whether the office could provide additional information about Arnulfo Bazan's immigration history. They may or may not even know it. Right? During an enforcement action, when immigration agents conduct an arrest, they are required to identify themselves as an immigration officer who is authorized to execute an arrest and state that the person is under arrest and the reason for that arrest, according to the federal government's code of regulations. But F all of that. This is not what America stands for, is the next section, except it is now, and you know why that's the case. All right, I'm going to stop at this point, but Joe's entirely right. This is a Kavanaugh stop. 50 days, I guess, moving on towards 60 with no answers, at least for Chris Geidner. So some very direct and pointed questions. But, the Supreme Court doesn't have to say anything. It was only through Kavanaugh's own stupidity that he put his name to the position they're all taking. And now it's a Kavanaugh stop. I don't know if that's a good thing. It may just encourage them all to stay silent from here on in. But, what can I tell you? That's the reality that we're facing. All right. By the way, to revisit another issue mentioned earlier on in the show, the weird, I guess there's maybe more connections between Tim Mellon and Epstein than just his name being on the bank that was looking the other way. But I got a couple of other, there's some real interest in this apparently overseas for some reason, but I happen to see an interesting headline here that I thought might be helpful from, it just says South Florida Media, but I don't know what that is, but sfl.media, and I'm not familiar with them, but I like the headline, Dumb Money. Billionaire Timothy Mellon gives Trump $130 million and accidentally ties his father's legacy to the Epstein scandal. That seems interesting. What might that be about? The Billionaire, the Strongman, and the Shadows of Secrecy. This is very melodramatic, but this is a piece by Patrick Zarelli. And again, sfl.media, no real familiarity with what they're talking about. But when the Pentagon confirmed it had accepted a $130 million, quote, gift to pay U.S. troops during the government shutdown, and I mean, they confirmed that they accepted it. Does that mean anything? Could they just be lying outright? Sure. Is there any mechanism for them to accept such a gift? Not really. Does it, by the way, violate the Anti-Deficiency Act? Yes. Any number of problems with it. But when the Pentagon confirmed it, America blinked, it said. The donor was Timothy Mellon, an heir to one of the country's oldest fortunes and a quiet mega donor behind Donald Trump's comeback campaign. The payment made under the Defense Department's, quote, General Gift Acceptance Authority, I don't think there is one, was hailed by Trump as patriotic heroism. In reality, it may violate the Anti-Deficiency Act, which forbids the government from spending unappropriated private money. This kind of donation could trigger criminal penalties, one former Pentagon counsel told Reuters, noting that agencies can't substitute private checks for congressional budgets. And if they were ever brought up on charges by people, I would add, who could actually do something about it, they would just deny that they had ever accepted it, because there really is no such thing as an acceptance. And who knows whether there was any kind of check involved. I'm sure it was electronic anyway. Plus, the money went to Kristi Noem's airplanes, as you know. The timing was combustible. A collapsing federal budget, troops without paychecks, and a billionaire writing the kind of check usually reserved for defense contractors, not citizens. The heir and the donor is the next little section. It's a lot of small sections here. Timothy Mellon, 80, is the grandson of Andrew Mellon, the Gilded Age banker, industrialist, and Treasury Secretary whose wealth helped shape modern American capitalism. For decades, Timothy lived in near total obscurity in Wyoming, running railroads and railing against taxes. Then came Trump. Between 2016 and 2024, Mellon poured over $165 million into Republican causes, including $125 million into Trump's Make America Great Again Incorporated Super PAC. His latest, quote, anonymous troop pay donation made him both Trump's savior and the subject of a media storm. Next up, Trump's pattern. Take the money, burn the donor. Trump's political life is a graveyard of benefactors. Everything Trump touches dies. Once he gets their cash, he forgets their existence until the spotlight shifts and he needs a scapegoat. Within days of Mellon's identity leaking, right-wing media started mining the Epstein archives for dirt on the billionaire's lineage. By week's end, social feeds were claiming Mellon's father had appeared on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet manifests. Whether coincidence or calculated distraction, the smear detonated just as Trump faced criticism for accepting a potentially illegal donation. Once again, a Trump ally learned the cost of proximity to power. He'll take your money, then feed you to the wolves. What's up here? The Mellon name and the Epstein rumor. Online sleuths seized on a supposed Flight 1090 entry listing J.E., Jeffrey Epstein, Paul Mellon, Carolyn, and 2 females. Is this good sourcing? I don't know. Screenshots ricocheted across X and Reddit, implying the elder Mellon, who died in 1999, had flown with Epstein. Here's what the verified evidence shows, allegedly. Some bullet points here. First, court-released flight logs from USV Maxwell contain no Mellon entries. Epstein's Little Black Book also contains no Mellon listings. This doesn't sound good at all. The Flight 1090 page circulating online appears only in unverified user-compiled spreadsheets, not the official exhibits. Fact check. No publicly authenticated record places any Mellon family member on Epstein's aircraft. Yet, the rumor persists because secrecy breeds conspiracy. When governments and billionaires hide information, the vacuum fills with screenshots, even if I guess they're fake. This is a good warning, a good backhanded way of injecting the rumor into our discussion too, by the way. The BNY Mellon lawsuit, the real money trail, is the next section. We mentioned this earlier. In October, the trafficking survivor filed suit against Bank of New York Mellon, accusing the bank of processing $378 million in payments linked to Epstein's shell companies and ignoring red flags. The bank, named for the same industrial dynasty, denies wrongdoing, but the headline BNY Mellon sued over Epstein ties blurred instantly with the donor's surname. That confusion poured gasoline on the rumor mill. It also spotlighted the deeper truth. Epstein's empire survived because global finance looked the other way. Whether it was J.P. Morgan, Deutsche Bank, or BNY Mellon, the machinery of privilege kept turning as girls were trafficked. Flight log forensics. What's real and what's altered? Well, there's a little chart here that basically restates the case, except in chart form. I don't know what else to tell you. The price of secrecy? Whether it's Epstein's hidden files, Trump's hidden donors, or billionaires moving money in the dark, secrecy is the oxygen of corruption. Mellon's $130 million, quote, gift exposed just how blurred the line between private wealth and public power has become. It also reminded Americans that when strongmen rely on billionaires, truth is usually the first casualty. The more light you shine on power, the fewer monsters survive it, is a quote that is offered here. Timothy Mellon wanted to look like a patriot. Instead, he spotlighted the rot of an era where billionaires write checks to governments, presidents sell loyalty for cash, and the public must fact-check flight logs to find the truth. Trump got his money, Mellon got his scandal, and the rest of us got another lesson in how darkness always protects the guilty first. It's an interesting note. And I guess you have to take it as exonerative if you are of the belief that there was a more direct connection between the Mellon family and Epstein. But was there a money connection? In the name of the bank? Yeah. I don't know how much of that profits of that bank go to arming Timothy Mellon to send allegedly $130 million to the Pentagon, and the Pentagon allegedly to accept it. But anyway, I guess if you were looking for a more direct connection, we can at least wave you off of that for now. There are a number of other possibilities here, and I guess I'll have to mention at this point that votes are off for next week too. By the way, the House just remaining in its extended recess, subject to the call of the chair being, of course, Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the House. And that brings us to, I guess we'll share this item before closing things out for the day from the New York Times again, another intriguing headline, and we'll fill in the blanks, I guess, around the what the effing F is going on in the House there. Anyway, keeping the House absent, Johnson marginalizes Congress and himself. That's the headline. The subheader reads, the Speaker's decision to hold the House in an indefinite hiatus during the shutdown is his latest move to diminish the role of the legislative branch and his own post. This is something that the founders really didn't count on, of course, and we've pointed at that a million times, that the idea was that they would all, what was the phrasing, jealously guard their prerogatives or something along those lines. Or unless they just surrender them in exchange for what, I don't know. But so far for Mike Johnson, it's been plane rides to Ultimate Fighting Championship nights with the president and their crew. And then they all have to take pictures of themselves eating hamburgers just to rub it in RFK Jr.'s face. Anyway, Annie Carney actually doing this reporting. Yeah, I guess her beat has changed over the years. I remember her from years ago. I mean, it's been years. I'm sure she's been promoted 10 times since then as the healthcare beat reporter, the healthcare policy beat. Anyway, it has been over a month, she writes, since there has been a policy debate, speaking of policy, or a vote on the House floor. Spending legislation is not being considered. Oversight hearings are on hold until further notice. Speaker Mike Johnson's decision to put the House on an indefinite hiatus that is now stretching into its second month while the government is shut down is the latest in the series of moves he has made that has diminished the role of Congress and shrunken the speakership at a critical moment. How shrinking? You'll see in a second here. It's an approach born of political expedience that could have far-reaching consequences for an institution that has already ceded much of its power to President Trump and Mr. Johnson, who, without the president's backing, wields little influence over his own members, has chosen to make himself subservient to Trump, a break with many speakers of the past, all of them, who sought in their own ways to act more as a governing partner with the president than as his underling. And are you ready for this? If you were wondering maybe you saw this and you're wondering where it came from, here's a quote. This is Trump. I'm the speaker and the president, Mr. Trump has joked. According to two people who heard the remark and related on a condition of anonymity because of concern about sharing private conversations with him, ending in their death and dismemberment, probably. Anyway, Mr. Johnson has done little in recent weeks to contest the point. He has argued that the House, which under the Constitution has the sole power to initiate spending legislation, has no reason to meet. as long as Senate Democrats are blocking a bill to reopen the government. He has refused to swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, a Democrat who won election last month, or a month ago, and has sued now in federal court to be allowed to take her seat, claiming he lacks the power to do so. He lacks a lot of power, doesn't he? His strategy of indefinite hiatus means that Mr. Johnson has not engaged in the typical political theater that speakers often employ during shutdown fights to jam the party out of power, scheduling tricky votes on bills to reopen parks or pay certain categories of federal workers like agents for ICE or Customs and Border Protection. Democrats had been bracing for him to do so, but instead he has spent much of the shutdown appearing daily at news conferences at the Capitol, hammering them for refusing to fund the government and making the case that Republicans need not negotiate. He is insistent that the House has nothing to do but wait for the stalemate to end, and he defends a growing list of extreme moves by Trump. The absenteeism, people around Johnson said, is a strategic calculation that the best way to keep his unruly rank and file in line is to place them on extended leave. And he may be right about that, but it don't look good. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich, who often serves as a sounding board for Johnson, said in an interview that if the House were in session, other issues will begin to clutter this up, and there is some small danger that Republicans might begin to have mixed messages on the shutdown. And in fact, such dissonance has already been bubbling up, even with everyone working remotely. The divide among Republicans over whether to extend expiring health insurance subsidies, Democrats' central demand in the shutdown fight, has highlighted a political vulnerability for the party. It's all created a strange dynamic on Capitol Hill. Johnson appears to be using the considerable power of the speakership to render the House irrelevant. That's unusual and new. Some Republicans are uneasy with the approach. Kevin Kiley, a vulnerable center-leaning Californian, has been staging a one-man protest at the Capitol by simply showing up to work and trying to engage his colleagues to return to the office, I would say. Representative Beth Van Dyne, a hard-right Republican from Texas, spoke up on private party conference call this week to say it was time for everyone to get back to Washington. Elise Stefanik, you know who she is, now eyeing a run for governor, has called for the House to return to take a floor vote on paying the troops during the shutdown. Even Stephen K.G.B. Bannon, the former White House advisor, has, I don't know what. We can't even get to it.
NetworksRadio.com.
Stumbling through this paragraph to try to find out.
Listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
I mean, this is actually kind of useless, but Bannon said he was growing more appalled by the day, and Mr. Johnson's decision to waste precious weeks by doing absolutely nothing is apparently appalling to him too. But I don't know. Friends say they're privately appalled, like Jared and Ivanka's friends, right? All right. Well, our friend Justice comes up next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We'll return to tell you more with Greg tomorrow.